Well. Welcome back, everyone. Let me pull up my stream real fast. So I've got the chat all good to go, but it's time to write some code. Alrighty, so if you don't know me, my name's Andrew. I'm one of two Andrews that co-founded a game studio called Chroma Golem last year. We mostly focus on taking our big backgrounds in AI and applying them to trying to figure out new mechanics in games that weren't possible before. So we've built a bunch of prototypes and demos on stream the last however long we've been streaming. It's been maybe 4 months, 3 months. Lots of really cool stuff. Lots of things people seem to like. I like, at least. And one of them in particular, called Elixir Emporium, we had a small demo up over on itch. You can actually let me pull it up for you real fast. But if you type demo in the chat, as I just did, there's a link to the link directly, and sweet, it's up on stream now. Let me pull up the actual game itself, but let me show you this real fast. But this is basically the original prototype that we built, and what you'll see in the background now, what we're working on this week and what we've been working on for about almost a month now, I think, is a huge scale up from this. So obviously you can see big old 3D open world, etc. But let me just quickly jump in this. I'll show you around, show you kind of what we are building. In this game, you play as an alchemist, so you can craft items. One moment. Somebody is at the front door. Be right back. Alrighty, sorry about that. Hope you enjoyed our funky fresh tunes in the meantime. But, as I was saying, in this game, you are an alchemist. You've been thrown into this world. We've got randomly generated NPCs. Each of them have their own professions, their own personalities, their own wants and needs and dislikes and likes. And we have AI come up with problems that they're each having. So that problem generation takes into account their personality, their role, the location that they're in, some of the other NPCs in town. If we click on this monk here, we'll get a problem from him. It's a little bit slow here, but we got Jocelyn here, commenting on the volcanoes in town. River's dry for the monks. They need something to cool their herbal remedies. So this is the hook, the prompt for the core game loop that the player goes through. They talk to an NPC, they learn about their problems, and then they use this sort of infinite crafting system that we've built for creating an item that then they can give to that NPC to solve their problem. So let me show you that real fast, and then we can jump into real code. But basically, it's pretty similar to any other crafting system you've used in any game, except I would say it goes a little bit further. So, for example, a lot of things have a recipe in the game already. So if you... It's been so long since I played in this demo, I can't even remember the recipes, but for example, if you take a crystal and a stick, if you were to combine those, you might expect to get like a wand, maybe if you attach the crystal to the end of the stick. But there's actually no recipe for that combination of items in the game. So what we do... Oh, well, that one actually went instantly, so it did have a combination. But there's probably not one for flower and wand. So when there's not a recipe, we're in the background asking an AI, hey, what happens when you combine these two items? So we've got a bloom wand, a mystical wand that radiates with the life force of nature, capable of revitalizing the surroundings. And it's got some attributes, some stats, and so on. It's got a value. But now that you have effectively learned that recipe, if you ever combine a flower and a wand again, you'll always get that bloom wand for this playthrough. So if you were to start a new game and combine them, there wouldn't be a recipe. You might get a different item that time. So it's a little bit of generation per game. But you can just basically keep combining more and more stuff. You get more and more complex items, and then your job as the alchemist is to come up with items that solve these NPCs' individual problems. And so that is actually done with AI as well. When you give the AI NPC an item, we're asking under the hood, like, this is the problem they're having, this is the item that was given, here's all of its attributes, and here's some other information. Does this item solve this problem? Yes or no? And we do some logic branching there. So that's a super, super short, high-level summary of everything that we're doing here. And yeah, the demo for this is in the browser. There's a lot to play through. I didn't touch on, I mean, there's a shop, there's buying and selling items, obviously, so you can make money just from crafting. You make more and more recipes as you learn them. You got foraging, so you can go collect a bunch of stuff wherever you go. Speaking of wherever you go, there's also traveling around. The locations are all generated with AI based on the source, like where you're at right now. So it looks at neighboring positions that haven't been generated yet and generates those. For each location, it'll generate new NPCs in that location that all have their own problems. If you come back to this location, you get the same NPCs, so you can build up these friendships. We didn't actually help this guy, or else we would have got some hearts with him or her. But yeah, there's a lot to do, and it was really fun to build, and we are now working on a bigger version of it. So imagine that. Let me jump into this world now, where it's still very much a work in progress, prototype phase. So there's a lot to be done still. But let me refresh my stream. It looks like it's pretty far behind, actually. All right, we are good to go. So we now have a 3D world that we can interact with. So instead of clicking into a menu and foraging for items that way by dragging over dirt and dragging over trees and rocks and stuff, we now have a big old world that you can go through. This is just a demo world with all the interactable objects, so we can quickly test stuff. But for example, if you talk to an NPC, I mean, I guess we can go do that. We've got NPCs over here. We're just kind of filling them out as kind of a pool of NPCs to use for the town. But for example, if we talk to, well, I think I disabled the generations real fast. Let me turn those back on so we can actually get proper dialogue and introductions from all the NPCs. But you'll see the same sort of game loop of go talk to the NPCs in town, introduce yourselves, talk to them, learn about their problems, and then you go out into nature and collect items and resources that might help them. And you can use your crafting system to combine items in the same way. So, I don't know, an axe and an acorn. What do you get there? A grove axe. So, it replants trees when you cut them, which isn't implemented quite yet, but if it is passed along to those NPCs when trying to solve their problems. So if we were to have like a wood cutting or a woodsman in town and he's like, hey, I need to cut down trees to supply all this wood, but I don't have enough time to plant all the trees as well, this would probably be the perfect item for him. So you get a lot of really interesting, unique items, and it's kind of up to you to decide, do you want to throw them on your hotbar and use them yourself? Or do you want to keep them in stash in case somebody might need them later? Or do you want to use them as ingredients for other items? If we were to take this grove axe and combine it with a hammer, we now get a forester's hammer, which is like an improved version but slightly different, and so on. So if we were to talk to, say, Farron Foragehand the blacksmith, he's going to introduce himself, and we've tweaked these prompts for their problems a lot, and we probably will keep tweaking them, but his problem right now is ever since the lunar eclipse, every metal I touch begins to rust instantly. So can you help? It's very open-ended. You have some kind of auto-generated responses that you could do in the conversation to try and move it forward, learn more about the problem, because I would have no idea where to begin of like, how do we prevent metals that he touches from rusting instantly? Probably some sort of potion, or maybe we get him gloves or something. So we can find him a special ore that resists rust. Inquire about enemies that might be causing it. Maybe we need to go out and slay an enemy or something. Maybe let's ask about an enemy. So you click on that, it'll generate the dialogue for you. And then he'll answer. Folks around here know better than to cross me. I've always treated everyone with respect. There was a strange fellow cloaked from head to toe lurking around a few nights past. So you could talk to him. You can kind of continue on that dialogue if you want. This is all stuff that we built last week, so I just want to do a quick recap on it. If you want to check out previous streams, they're all up on our YouTube, and you can hit the chat with a !YouTube for the link there as well. And it should show up on stream. I guess if you're watching this on YouTube, you already know where to find it, but there you go. You can also say whatever you want to him. So maybe just offer, would gloves help? Since the metal only rusts when he touches them. So apparently gloves would not help. So rather than going out and collecting some leather and then using that leather with like needle and thread or something to make gloves, now you can kind of just ask, like, do you think that would help or not? But yeah, you can talk to all these people. They've all got their own problems. They've all got their own personalities. They're very placeholdery right now, but they're all pretty fun so far. This apothecary is she always thinks she's sick with something, but she never is. So she has you come out and collect ingredients for potions that help her, but she's not actually sick, so that's always fun. But yeah, that's the hook. But what happens next in the cycle is you as a player need to go out and collect the items that you need to craft. So we've got a bit of just debug stuff that we started with here. It's mostly all tools, but you'll see that all the objects in this world, when you hover over them, they've got some sort of tag that says like what they are. And we also have this toolbar down here. So if we were to take, let's say, scythe, hammer, shears. I'm seeing a bug where if we are, as a side note, I had it where you click to move. But last night, I added it where you can click and drag to keep moving, and I'm just now realizing when you're dragging around an item, it's still going to keep doing that. So that's a small bug we might fix later. But let's just drag on some items, and let's put a bucket on as well. So when you don't have an item selected, so we've got an empty thing here, and you select to interact with any object, what it's going to do is use your bare hands on that object. So punching a tree gets you birch logs. Right now, when you click on it, every time you click on it, you get a new item. It's always the same item once you've collected that first item and we've generated the recipe of what happens when you use X item on object. But if we were to switch over to maybe a hammer and use that on the birch tree, which has its own animation, now we got birch planks. Every time we use a hammer on a tree, we get birch planks now, or on a birch tree at least. If we were to use maybe a bucket on the birch tree, doesn't have an animation, so 1 second while we do that, we got birch sap. So we can use any item on any object, which I think is really cool. We can just also hit it up with like a scythe, maybe some birch seeds or something. Birch logs. So multiple ways you can get each item is also nice. And let's just try shears. We're probably going to get some like twigs or leaves or something. Birch bark. All right. So you might want bark for something. So you can kind of see it's also filling up our inventory with all this birch stuff. We don't have an image generation in just yet for the items, but they are generating these items on the back in the background, giving it like these stats, weight and durability. Giving them these kind of flavor text pieces. This piece of birch bark is smooth and flexible, great for crafting or starting fires, which gives you a little bit of an idea of like what you can use each thing for. Sap is a sweet smelling liquid collected from a birch tree, useful for various crafting recipes. So we're going to also have an NPC, kind of like the Terraria guide, where you can go give him an item, say this acorn, and he'll tell you all the stuff that you can craft with it. So you get a little bit more guidance that way. There's a lot of stuff to build there. But that is all to say, just going and clicking on an object over and over again isn't really the most fun way to collect resources. And although it is necessary for our loop of talk to an NPC, go collect items, craft an item, and give it back to the NPC, I think it's really fun right now to talk to these NPCs, but the resource collection side of this loop is pretty bland. You just kind of go. You don't really do anything at all other than just click over and over again. It's kind of fun to use a new tool on each object each time and kind of learn what the recipe is for it. Like a hammer on an overgrown bush. I don't know what you're going to get. Trimmed bush branches, I guess. Maybe like a scythe on a regular bush. We got trimmed bush leaves. Or if you use a bucket on a bush, maybe you get some berries or something. But I think the two big pieces that we can improve to make this loop a lot more fun is, one, we should make it a little easier to kind of preview the item that you'll get if you use an item on a specific object. For example, the game knows that if we use a bucket on a bush, it will give us a bundle of berries. But with so many different interactions, the player probably doesn't remember that unless they've done that recently. And they shouldn't have to like go through and click each individual tool to use. So what we want to do for sure is add to this tooltip a little preview of your current tool that you're using. So for example, a bucket, and what item you'll get from it. So if somebody wants some berries for a pie, maybe you come over to a bush and you can just hover over it and scroll your scroll wheel to go through all these different things, and it'll show you what each individual tool will give you, so you can kind of select what tool you need to use instead of the trial and error. But also, having to just click on the bush over and over again is not very fun. So I want to take some design inspirations from RuneScape on this, where you click on an object and it'll just keep keep harvesting more and more from that resource until you click somewhere else. So for example, if we use this hammer on this bush, we get our nice little animation. We get twigs back. I want to just keep getting more and more twigs over time until we stop. And I think one thing that could be improved upon on that system is giving it the option to be a little more active. Like, I really, really like the cadence of what I like to call like the second screen game of you're able to just click on something and then go do something else on another screen for a few minutes maybe. And you're making progress or collecting a resource in that game, and you can come back and then use that and you have it. But I think that there's something to be said for a more active approach. And so what I want to try building this week is something of a harvesting mini game. So if you picture, I guess best example might be the little box that shows up down here when you hover over something. If you think of that more like a progress bar, while you're harvesting, you might see the progress go left to right and fill up the whole bar. And then at the end of the bar, you get the item you want. So if you think of that over and over again, that's probably a good visualization of you click on a thing, it's just going to give you that thing every once in a while. But I think what we can kind of do is turn that into almost like a rhythm game, where every time the bar starts over, there's a small section of the bar that is highlighted. And if you click in that section, your bar jumps forward a bunch. So we can call it like a critical harvest or whatever. But if you are actively playing the game, collecting some resources, and you just want to collect a bunch really fast, you can start harvesting. That progress bar keeps going. You click in the right spot, it goes faster and faster and faster. I think that's kind of a cool way to implement a kind of skill-based mechanic to speed up the game without it feeling grindy, but also give the player the option to just kind of hands off. I need a bunch of this resource, so I don't have to click over and over again, even as a rhythm game. Like, if you force people to play a rhythm game, I think it's going to feel very grindy and they're not going to like it. But if it's treated more as a reward for if you engage in this rhythm game, you'll get items faster. It lets them choose whether they want to or not, which kind of breaks up that monotony of grinding. So I think that specifically is what we're going to try and build today. And I think we're going to intentionally leave it a little bit open on design, because I don't know if it'll be fun or not. But I also want to experiment with some equipable items later. So obviously we have some stats on some of the items that we've built, and I want to start giving uses to some of those stats later. So for example, Axe has a really generic wood cutting plus 10% stat here. I want to replace that with probably 2 or 3 more attributes. One, for example, can make that bar fill up faster. So as you're just AFK collecting resources, you're going to get them faster because that bar fills up faster. And you can just call that like foraging efficiency or something. One attribute we can say is how much the bar jumps when you click in that highlighted rhythm section. So for example, maybe it just fills up the rest of the bar. If you, it's somewhere over here, you click at the right time, the bar just completely fills up, you get the item, it starts filling up again. That's one end of the spectrum versus like if you click on it and it jumps forward just a tiny little bit. It's not that impactful, but you can manipulate how much it jumps based on the axe you're using or the items you have equipped, something like that. And I think a third attribute that we'll probably experiment with is how wide that highlighted section is. I know not everyone is super good at rhythm games like that or clicking at the right time. And I think introducing an optional attribute that players can slot in an item or two there if they need it is a cool way to handle that, where if you have a few items where your, I don't know what to call it, critical harvest chance is increased, it basically just creates a wider section on the bar of where you can click to jump forward and get that jump. So we've got a couple different ways to manipulate this system, but I think we should just build the system as we're imagining it now, and we can go ahead and tweak it later. But I think what we'll want to do is some minor changes. We have this like interaction preview show up whenever you're hovering over something. And we also have the tooltip over the mouse. I think what we want to change is whenever you're actively interacting with anything, this guy should stay there. We'll keep the mouse tooltip there so you can kind of preview other things you might want to interact with, but we'll go ahead and just use this HUD one down here as the like progress bar indicator, and we'll build a little background slider for it, and then we'll also build in a little highlight section for it. And lastly, I think there's a few other things we want to do. We'll get to them later, but one big systems change we'll need to make probably first is switching into more of a interaction mode instead of just right now you click on the object and it says start a background process after half a second, give them the item. We want to instead, when you click on it, set a state on the player of they are interacting with this object, and while that state is true, then we want to deal with this interaction thing. So we're just going to jump into code now. I feel like I've talked for quite a while, so thank you for being patient, and let's just kind of start. So kind of clean things up here real fast, and let's jump into our player controller. So this is probably where we'll want to set our current interaction state. Let me close everything else. But we also have a generic interactable world object that on mouse down triggers for, and that's what each object uses to say, all right, start interacting with this object. And so that's what we're going to use for kind of our entry point into starting this harvesting minigame. And looks like I've got some debug stuff in here from last time, but I think we got that all sorted out. What we want to do is, instead of our interact function, which is this big boy here, what we'll do is probably call a method on the player controller that says start an interaction. And I think moving the logic over to the player controller will be good, because that'll also let us like end the interaction on mouse input or something else. If you try and walk away, we don't want to be reaching across different objects and stuff and manipulating the data over there. So let's just kind of, I guess, take a deep breath and stop trying to talk through every single thought, and then think through what we'll actually do. So one approach, which could work, is if we were to do a public class player interaction, some sort of like data class, we could store what the player is interacting with, and also what object they're using to interact with it. And in our interaction function, what we could do is say something like player database instance.controller gives us our player controller dot start interaction with, and then we just pass like this with our, and I guess we're already grabbing the active item off the player database, so we might not even need to pass that through. We can just say start interaction with this, and I'll just put it down here so it's easy to see for now, but start interaction with. So we're gonna just try and prototype this a little bit, see how it feels. And my only hesitation with doing a like data class like this was just if it could be nullable. We might end up just doing a Boolean flag for like is currently interacting, and if it is, then reaching into our player interaction instance. But what can happen now is there's probably stuff that we want to pull off of the object that we're interacting with. So for example, it should probably be faster to interact with, say, like a leaf of grass that we have over here. So we have like tall grass. And if you interact with tall grass, you get, do you get tall grass? You get hand-picked grass. So this should probably be a pretty fast interaction time-wise. Like maybe you get more hand-picked grass, maybe 2 a second or 1 a second or something like that. Versus if you walk over here and you're interacting with a mossy boulder and you're punching it. Let's see what you get when you punch a boulder. Anything? Or are we not actually? I might need to update the colliders on that guy. Let's try this boulder. Or maybe let's bring in a pickaxe so we actually have animations and we can see if we're actually doing stuff. Yeah, I think I need to update these colliders on the boulders. But maybe stone block. We pretend that's a boulder. It should probably be, should take you longer to mine cobblestone from a boulder or a cliff or something than it should be to pick up some tall grass. So that time that it should take probably should live on the actual object itself. Although there's probably an argument to be made that it might want to live on maybe the tool or be a combination of the object and a tool, because trying to think of some guiding principles here. But if you were to use an axe on a tree, that might take longer than using a bucket on a tree. So given there's two different times for this tree, might not make sense to store it on the tree. But we probably also don't want to store it on the item either, because using an axe on this tree versus an axe on a branch is going to be different times as well. So I think what we're going to do, just for simplicity's sake, is store it on the object, and we'll just come back to that another time with probably more of a 2D table of time lookups based on object and tool. But for now, we can kind of give some scale and progression of, for example, we have 4 different pine trees here. That one shouldn't be labeled an oak tree. Oh, we're catching this guy. Lots of collider things I need to fix. Let me through. Alright, so for example, we have 4 different sizes of pine trees here. What we can do is just say, like, the younger pine tree is faster to harvest, older pine tree is slower to harvest. This huge, like, tree of creation is what we called it over here, is probably really slow to harvest from. I think it's pretty logical that we can set some harvest times per object, and then we can kind of manipulate that a little bit from the items themselves, but I think that'll be fine. So we'll stick it on the object. So this is our super parent class for anything interactable, and I don't think we need to go that high, because, for example, interactable NPCs don't necessarily have a harvest time. So I think we can just set this on the interactable world object. We can say public float base harvest time in seconds is equal to 1. So right now, every object, when you click on it, you will harvest for 1 second, and then you will get the item, and then you will just keep harvesting. 1 second later, you'll get another item, and so on. So there's a lot of changes to be made, so I'm trying to think it through and go very slowly and purposefully through each piece so we can keep it going. But what we will do, we have our start interaction with method. The entity will, well, if we store it as an entity, it's not going to have access to the harvest time, because that's a subclass. So that would mean we either need to move this up to the entity level, or we need a separate, like, start interaction with for objects versus NPCs, which kind of does away with some of the polymorphic strategies we're using here. So we might move this up. Let me think that through. But I think we'll start writing this and just kind of see what needs done. So the other piece that we need to know, in our HUD, we have a target info bar. This guy, that is what we will set active. And I think we might decouple that from the on mouse enter, on mouse out, because right now we're doing both that and the mouse cursor. I think we'll just stick to the mouse cursor when mousing over objects, and then we'll leave that for when you're actually interacting with an object. So you'll get just the cursor when you hover over the overgrown bush, and then when you're interacting with it, that's when you'll get the bottom one. And we can do the rhythm minigame in that. So it's a little bit less duplicitous UI and more purposeful. So let's do that. So we've got our target info bar controller. We can go ahead and unlink the HUD stuff from it. And then on an actual interaction, that's where we will go ahead and show that HUD. And I think what we'll want to do, since we're no longer managing it from this controller, we'll pass through the actual entity that we're interacting with. So generic interactable entity. So then we can say UI references .instance .target infobar controller .show HUD with target. Make that public so we can use it. We will load in the stuff. And so the code right now, when we click on an object, now it should show the HUD forever. We'll have public void stop interaction, stop active interaction, and that will hide that HUD. We want to rename these now that we're using them a little bit differently. We'll say interaction bar. And let's go ahead and change the HUD container to interaction bar container. I think that should be good. I am going to go ahead and mock back up our NPC brains, just so we're not generating a ton of brain info for every NPC every time we go into the demo, just for my own token sanity. But now, if we were to go into this game, which we have one quick error to fix because we renamed this, so that's on our target info bar controller here. HUD info bar. That's our new reference. Let's call this interaction bar. Is that what we called it? Yeah. So now that we've fixed that up, if we pop into this game, we should only see the tooltip on mouse for interacting with stuff, but then when we go to interact with something, we show this. And it only changes to the new thing when we actually start interacting. We'll get it closing when we stop interacting, but for now, we Need to take this out as well. We're overriding the text, as you can see when you hover over something new. So that'll be fixed as well, but that's a good base for us to work from. So now we are just using the mouse tooltip for this. So let's rename this as well. Let's say set mouse tooltip information, just to be a little clearer when we come back to that later. Cool. So we now get this bar whenever we interact with something. What we want to do is let's hook it up for a fun little rhythm game. There's probably some styling and design that I want to improve on it, but I feel like I always get to the point where I'm like, oh, I should hold off on working on this because I'm going to redesign it later. And then I never redesign it and therefore never build that feature. So let's just go ahead and build the feature, and it probably looks fine enough right now. It's very generic, but oh well. So let's get a fill effect. So we'll call this fill, anchor it to the left. Let's make sure the border renders on top of it, and we can have it scale across like this. Let's see if we've got any nice like textured sprite for it. I'm sure we don't, but maybe we do. Something like this could work. Maybe we do the purple. It goes across like that. So that could work. So let's go ahead and maybe it's time we add a script to the interaction bar itself for handling this sort of minigame, because we probably don't want it living on the target info bar controller. Maybe we do. This is literally all just for the mouse tooltip and this guy. So maybe we do. We can have it here. So what we'll end up doing is say begin interaction. And that will set our fill to a width of 0. And then it will calculate how fast it should go across in order to completely fill up when the object's harvest time is done. And then we can have that coroutine filling it up, and at the end, when it is filled up, we can give the player and the harvested item, and then we can reset and say like reset interaction or something, and it'll start back at 0 and continue on. So let's do that. We've got okay. So what we want to do here, let's say Let's do that placeholder and this placeholder. So this guy is going to set fill to 0. Wait, what is fill amount? Is that a property we could just use on? Oh. You know, that's probably cool for some things. What does it look like on a horizontal? Okay, I mean that is probably better than trying to modify the transform's height and width, because now we can actually just expand it to the whole size, and then we can have a fill amount of 0 to 1. It's a little weird that it goes outside of the border, so let's bring it in just a tad. I think actually the border needs to come out. Why are you looking so funky, my guy? No, it's just the sprite we have. Alright, we'll bring in the fill. Something like that. So it can now fill them out across, which is good. Thinking through the highlight stuff we want to do later, I think we'll just want to layer something else on top and like reposition it based on some percent through. But that's fine, we should be able to do that. What does vertical look like? That'd be silly. Alright, so we'll do horizontal. Filling left or right. Cool. I guess we could even bring it in a little bit more from here to here. Is that weird? It's a little weird. Yeah, I like that. Alright, so we set our fill amount to 0. We are gonna wanna store a coroutine. Interaction coroutine. That's what's going to handle updating that fill amount, updating or checking to see if we're in like a highlight spot and the user clicked on something, which just now realized we probably need to like lock the user input so when they click on the screen it's not moving there somewhere else or something like that. Give them a button to press maybe. But we want to start our coroutine here. So interaction coroutine root and we'll make a IEnumerator. Let's see. Yeah, we can call it that. Interaction routine. So in reset, we'll go ahead and clear that. Whenever we end an interaction, we'll clear that. I forgot how to clear it. Clear interaction coroutine. Just do it though. Alright, we'll come back to that. I'll just Google it. Let's see here. So let's do a float time to fill is equal to we need to pass through the object that we are interacting with, specifically our world object. Let's bring up the harvest time to the entity. I mean, we can just set the harvest time to NPCs to like 0 or something. But we could also make it higher if we wanted them to like stare down an NPC before they talk or something like that. It doesn't super matter. We just want to make sure that nah. I think what we actually want to do is just only allow interactions with world objects, and we can just do a different branch of logic for NPCs. So can we pass this through like this? Maybe. Okay. Let's just, yeah, say interaction complete here. Let's get our piping through, and then we can just check to see if the fill is working. What do you want here? Nothing takes. Begin interaction with. Oh, right. Target info bar. Controller. So we can get this reference. Cool. We will call reset interaction here. Doesn't do anything quite yet, but that's what's gonna obviously reset it and call a new coroutine and so on. I wonder if this kills the coroutine. Surely not. But let's. I have no idea if this is gonna work. Let's just see. I'm so tired today. So we get the mouse tooltip on whatever we're hovering over. If we click on this guy, we get this, but we also got an error because we didn't set our fill, I think. So UI references, target info bar, interaction fill needs that. All right, let's try that once more. You should set that fill to 0, and then should, over the span of a second, increase it up to 1. Ta-da! So that's when you'll get the item, assuming you've already got the recipe. Don't know why we're Disco Raven so hard. But I like that. It makes some sense. Gives you a little bit more of a sense of progression. If you wanted to just keep interacting with this object over and over again. You wouldn't have to click. You could just keep doing that, and then when you start this interaction, we'll generate a little spot on it where if you, I don't know, press spacebar or something, that's when you can get the critical harvest and jump forward, so you can have a little gameplay to harvest things faster if you want. And yes, the keen-eyed among you may notice that this animation for woodcutting is actually the animation for fishing. We don't have a woodcutting animation quite yet. We have pretty much everything else, like harvesting and pickaxe and hammering and other stuff, but no woodcutting quite yet. Gotta rig it up still. Alrighty, so let's now take over what's giving the item to the player. Let's bring it into this interaction routine. This guy. I think we actually want to branch here, because there's two cases that can happen. One, you click on this bush and the recipe for what you get is already known, and we can definitely wait a set amount of time and then give you that item. But the very first time you do that, it's less definite of how long the AI generation will take, so it's more of like a research step. So we don't necessarily want a like specific loading bar there, unless we want it to just keep cycling over and over again, but I don't think that'd be nice. I think we should differentiate a little bit of like researching new thing, and then when we actually know that step, that's when we can start the interaction. So let's do a little bit of branching here. So we get our item. Why are we serializing the tool? Oh, it's used way down there. All right, we don't need that quite yet. So we're going to get our current item. We're going to look up what item you get when you use that item on an object. And then we will say, if we know what item you're going to get, start that interaction that we're building now. If you don't know what item we're going to get, we will stick to the old process of just keep animating until we know. And we'll tweak that a little bit more, but we want to work more on the rhythm side of it today. So let's make sure we've got everything we need. Face the player to the object, play the player's animation. Let's do it like that, and then we can go ahead and just do a nicer little known result or known interaction. And we can say if known interaction, then we can start our interaction. Otherwise, we'll do this thing. Let's bring it all over. That is something we'll come back to polish up more another time. We are more focused on the interaction experience up here today. So what we will do is move most of this that just gets the item, adds it to their inventory, shows the pop-up, redraws inventory window, and so on, and handles the animation. We're moving that into the interaction routine. So all that can run after the time is up. So if we just bring all that over as is, we're going to get some errors. We'll need to recompute result for this interaction, which just gives us the item name, I believe. Right? Yeah, we pass it into find item. So let's also grab active tool belt. It's all just lookups in a dictionary, so it's super fast anyway. Get display name. I don't remember what that is. Is that a method over here? Oh, for the object. Oh, okay. Cool, so now the only thing that we have left to do is cancel the player animation, which we don't actually want to do until we end the interaction. Cancel player animation. We instead want to keep it going and just basically start another coroutine of this whenever it's done. So let's kill all this. And in reset, we can go ahead and say interaction fill. Fill amount is 0, and then actually, let's just call begin interaction with again. And I think what we should probably do here is add a slight delay. So there's just one more little optimization the player can do if they want to be as efficient as they want. If there's a slight delay before the next time they start harvesting, they can go ahead and know when to click exactly and cut out that delay, but they don't need to. It's kind of the same mindset as like running and sprinting in games. They're usually not that different at all, but having the ability to sprint feels a lot better just because you have that little option to sprint and cut off time if you need. Let's see if we can continuously harvest a resource now. We're going to punch this chaos tree. Or we use a hammer on this chaos tree. So we have an animation. Alright. Chaos wood planks, but we didn't continue on. Oh. Oh, okay. So that was the first one where we're figuring out what to what resource we're getting. But now that we know, we've gone into the second branch that we've built, and that feels a lot better. It errored somehow. Value cannot be null. What do we got? Where is my cursor? Find item. Value was null apparently. Oh, yeah, we should probably store what item we started the interaction with, because it's pulling our tool belt at the end each time. So if I scroll over, value cannot be null because right here we're grabbing the active item. But it shouldn't actually be null at that case. We should be... Should be switching over to our bare hands. It's not a big issue, but it is something I'll want to fix, probably off stream. But this lets us continuously harvest, which is nice. And if we want, we could switch over to an axe. Let's close it with our nice arrow. Oh, we can't. Alright, so if we start with an axe, we now know axe gives us chaos wood logs. So I think what should happen, I mean, obviously we'll have a little wood cutting animation here, but what should happen when you switch to the hammer is you probably want to stop the interaction. But right now it'll switch us over to getting planks. I mean, I could see an argument for letting a player just click on an object and have set up their hotbar for like everything that they want. Like, so now if we want to also be doing our fishing rod thing, we gotta figure out what item we get. But once we know that, we're getting chaos fish. So you could set up this hotbar and just kind of go through. Now we're getting planks, now we're getting axe. But I think it makes more sense to cancel the interaction, so we don't even need to worry about this bug, because we'll cancel it out. But things are looking good. We're collecting items pretty fast. I do want to keep this kind of fast-paced collection, just because I don't want collecting items to be grindy, but we will need to slow down a little bit to make the click to jump feature more impactful, I think, and more rewarding. But if we grind up some chaos fish with a mortar and pestle, wonder what we get. Powder of chaos. Cool, cool, cool. And we probably... I'll think more about crafting another day, but it might make sense to have tools. There's an argument of like, that shouldn't have used up our mortar and pestle, so it should have like stuck around and we could keep using it on something, but it is like, sometimes you want to upgrade the tool, which does use it up. So if we use chaos fish and a scythe, we'll probably get like a chaos scythe. Yeah, scythe of chaos. And that should use up the tool. So maybe we have some different UI elements of like, if you want to upgrade a tool versus use a tool repeatedly on an item. But we are just, you know, harvesting away those chaos fish. And they're worth 10 gold a piece. Dang, we're gonna be rich. But things are looking good. So the next thing that we want to fix is when you click away, we want to end the interaction. When you change what item is selected, we want to end the interaction. If you Okay, so if you interact while you're already interacting, I was going to say it should not interrupt it and continue on. That's actually already what we're doing, so it's not like starting over or anything, which is great. And I wonder if interacting will work with our bare hand. We'll have to test that too. But first, let's go ahead and set up stopping this interaction. So in our info bar controller, end interaction is just where we're going to stop playing the player's animation, and we will stop the coroutine, right? Cool, so that coroutine is what continuously gives you more items. There's some really interesting bugs to be had here. If you have a way to avoid ending this interaction, you would just keep getting items forever while you're doing other stuff in the game, so might not be the best way to structure things just because of the risk inherent there, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. But all we want to do is on mouse down. Let's start with the player controller. So on mouse down over here from moving. We will want to end the interaction, I think. Is there any reason they might want to press the mouse down without ending the interaction? I don't think so. We don't want to use the left mouse button for the minigame, I think, because we don't want to lock it away from being able to like interact with other objects and move away from what you're interacting with. So we might end up using either a keyboard key or a right click or something like that. So left mouse should always really interrupt whatever you're interacting with, unless you're clicking in like a UI or something. So we can go ahead and say, even if you don't like click on something specifically, if you do click, it's gonna, right? Yeah, if you do click at all, it'll interrupt your interaction. So we can say UI references and you end. So that fixes, now if you go and click on a tree, start wood cutting forever. If you click on the ground somewhere else, or if you click on an object somewhere else, it'll stop your animation and then move you if it's something to move to. I don't think we need to duplicate that in the on mouse down here because both of them fire, which is a little funky for race conditions, but is nice here. Let's see. And any current interactions with objects. And we're probably going to have something very similar for like NPCs, where if you click somewhere else, it's going to close the dialog window, stuff like that. But I want to make sure that this is working just the way I expect it to. So if we go and click on this guy, the first time it's going to just animate until we know what we get. We don't get our bar at all. So we'll probably switch that over to more of like a animation, just to make the research aspect a little more marked. But now that we know what we get when we use bare hands on this, we can go ahead and click to harvest. which will continue on forever. And then if we click away, it didn't stop it. Okay. Infinite items. Let's see here. So end interaction. Did we set the coroutine correctly? We did not. Interaction coroutine is this guy, not just a regular old in-scope variable. All right, let's try that again. All right, first time is research. Now we harvest. Or we don't. Okay. So now if we click away, we do need to hide this, but it did what we wanted. Stopped the harvesting, we can go back and harvest some more. It's going to start over. And if we click away, cool. So one, let's hide that HUD, and two, let's hook our initial research step. Once it's complete, let's start interacting automatically afterwards. Let's see here. End interaction, let's say hide the interaction bar. And then over yonder, this guy, at the end of got interaction recipe, we collect our item, we discover the recipe, we add it to the inventory, and then start auto harvest. Instead of canceling our animation, we can just go ahead and start harvesting. And we'll want to have some like fanfare and stuff over here to say like new recipe unlocked or whatever we want to call the object tool pairings, just to kind of differentiate. Yeah, that first time took longer because you don't know what you're doing. Now you learned something, so now you can harvest this resource faster and whenever you want. All right, so we're gonna click on this. It's gonna go right into the first step, and then we got our item and it went into harvesting. Cool. So we probably want a little bit of a different UI for the research aspect. So maybe we'll show that HUD and maybe do like some sort of icon for like learning or researching or something like that, just to show like it's separate. But now when you leave, it looks a lot better. Okay, so that looks good. And we can adjust the adjust the time it takes each object. So if we take this guy and set his harvest time to like 8 seconds, which would be really long. Now we've got this, and the case for like clicking at a certain time becomes a lot more prominent, because this is taking pretty darn long. But if you wanted to play this sort of like rhythm game of click here, 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 or whatever, it goes a lot faster basically. But that's working. All right, so let's style up the HUD for this research part. What we want to do is, let's say, we'll kill this because we moved it over, but in our player controller, here, we can go ahead and show the HUD, show a special icon on the HUD, and then just keep doing this. The question is, do we want to move all of this over into the HUD logic, or do we want to keep it on the player? I think we want to keep it on the player, like, just in terms of logically this is an operation on the player and this is more for like UI manipulation. It's a little silly that we are manipulating the inventory from over here, but it's fine for now. We can always improve it later. It doesn't need to be perfect at the start. Let's see here. So let's show our HUD, our interaction bar, I mean. Let's actually make a method over here for showing a research interaction bar. And we'll call that, and then we don't need to mess with what exactly we're doing in the UI. We can just say, like, that's our intention, and the UI controller can be in charge of setting it up. Show research. So that'll basically give us the default, and then I think what we want, maybe we can add some sort of like icon or something. We can toggle that on or off. But let's see what our options are. We don't have a lot of assets in this game right now. Just been working more on the code side of things. But let's see what we've got for now. Interaction bar is here. If we were to create an image in it, for a research icon or something. Let's see what we've got. So we'll just see if anything makes sense to like pop up that might imply that things are being researched. That is the icon we use for showing recipes. So we might come back to that and do something with it. We could position that like up here with some sort of like fill indicator that surrounds it in a circle. It'd be nice if we had an indefinite loading indicator instead of one that has a start and an end. Like one of the circles that kind of pulse in and out is better because we don't know how long it'll take. But let's look and see if there's anything better than book. That might imply like researching, or that'll be a nice cursor to have when we do our custom cursors. I think the book is where we want to go. Maybe we could just put like some sort of circle indicator around it and rotate that as a quick little indefinite loader. Yeah, I think that's fine. Let's grab our book. And let's add a rotating border. See what we got for circles. Can we search circle? Nah. Border. What do we call it? I know we have some. Like something like this. Need it to be a little more detailed though, because obviously, let's see here. It's not super obvious when you're rotating it like this that it's actually rotating, you know? The highlights make it a nice subtle effect, so maybe that'll be fine. So if we take this guy, make it just a little bit bigger, center it, let's go a little bit bigger still. Even out that height and width that I borked. And maybe actually that's a little too big. Let's do this. Kind of center it in like that. And we have a nice little rotate on x-axis. Let's make sure that yeah, that's not actually what we want. Oh, that's the y-axis. X-axis. Also not what we want. We want to rotate on that z-axis. So, you know what? We could modify this and make it all nice and complex, or we can just say rotate on z-axis and do the exact same thing in a new script. And that would be vector 2 dot up, right? Or vector 2 dot forward, I think. Whatever the forward equivalent is. Vector 3 dot forward, right. There's no forward in 2D. Cool. Rotation speed we'll probably need to manipulate a bit, but this should at least have some sort of like indicator that something is happening. Let's go ahead and do something like this. Maybe we do a little background fill with one of our colored backgrounds. So it's not super transparent, but we'll do something like purple one's probably good. Let's fill it. And then get that under the border. We want the icon like that. And we'll do a research loading placeholder. Just a nice little parent object that we can enable and disable as we want. And so we probably will also add like the tool being used as a little preview, but this should be fine for now. Actually, with our background, we could even do a filled radial, something like this. But we would need it to continuously loop or be really slow and then jump to the end. So I don't know that we want to do this. No, I don't think we do. But what we can do now is on this guy, we can have our public game object research indicator, and here where we call player database.instance.controller.start research, or whatever we called it, show research bar. Let's say start research with. I like that. Although it should probably be, why do we have begin interaction with and start interaction with? Oh, right. This is completely different class. UI references. Say start research with. And we'll leave that as begin for now. We'll consistentize it later. Let's see here. So here we can say research indicator dot set active true. We will need to handle like making sure that's always false in all other cases. But for now, maybe we say public void end research, and we just have that as a reusable function we can use if just tack it in interaction and research as well. So that means if we start researching and then click away, which already calls end interaction, that'll also clear our research specific stuff too, in addition to the regular interaction stuff. Okay, so we start the research, which shows the indicator, shows the HUD, fills it to 0, and then we generate the recipe of what it will produce. Stop the research. Before we start auto harvesting, we'll go ahead and call end research, and then we do the start animation. So let's play that. It should look a lot more polished. Let's make sure that that is off by default. And let's also make sure that we have our reference to it set, which we don't. But I think this will be a lot smoother, because now we will click on this tree and it'll be a lot clearer that we're researching it in some way. Maybe we even add some text of like researching. But once we have the result researched, then we are beginning to harvest. So that looks cooler, I think. It's not super clear like what's happening in terms of communicating it to the player, but the system works, and obviously we can polish it up later. So let's try once more on this bush. We run over there. It doesn't start researching until we get there. And then when it's done researching, it'll unlock the recipe, which we still need a little like pop-up for saying, congratulations, you unlocked this. And then it just switches into harvesting, which I think is super cool. And if this is also a bush, so if we were to run over here, it would start with harvesting. If we run over to the birch tree, it'll start with researching. We don't have an animation for it quite yet. For wood cutting, I think we just hard-coded it on that tree specifically for testing. But yeah, we maybe try on this branch. Researching. I think we will add a label real fast. And then maybe let's, oh right, the boulders don't work. Maybe the stone will work. Cool. So that's all working. That is good baseline for what we wanted to add today. Let's quickly add some better styling on this real fast. Let's add a little UI text saying researching text. We don't want to use these words, but that's effectively what we want to communicate, of like the player is figuring out what's about to happen. Coming up with a plan, maybe, is kind of the vibe we're looking for. Or like taking a good look at blank. Thinking through what to do. Basically, we're just communicating to the player that this is the first time you've used this tool on this object. So the player has to think it through a little bit. Alright, so, and I think one more way to kind of hammer that in is we don't yet want to give them the item at the end of the discovery. We want to give them a little pop-up, like more of a personal progression type thing of you've figured this out versus giving them the item right away. So let's comment this out and see how it feels. We want to make sure that here, when we call, a little bit weird that one place we're calling add item on item database and one place we're just adding it directly to the inventory. I want to make sure that that's the same. Data should be the inventory. That's a little funky. We'll come back to that. But we want to make sure that we're discovering the item each time. So let's take a look at that. Discovered items should be a set, right? So, okay, we don't have to worry about calling it multiple times. So let's just make sure that anytime we give the player an item through here, we are discovering it. And I think what we want to do, let's give this a shot so we can kind of normalize to using the item database instead of interacting with the inventory manually. But it's a little odd that this isn't. Let's go look at the player database. So in here we've got an inventory. That is adding the item. That's adding it to the actual inventory. The item database add item is adding an item like to the game itself. So we actually want to do both, but we want to make sure that this, okay, it's not going to add it twice. If we already have this item in the game, it's not going to re-add it. So we do actually need that for adding it to the player's inventory, but we can also say add the item to the game. Add the item to the player's inventory. So actually, obviously this makes a lot more sense back over where we had it, where you're coming up with that recipe to begin with. The resulting item gets created and added to the game and discovered for the player. Okay, so that should be fine. Add the player, add it to their inventory. So discover item, we can put in a little like to do show a little discovered item message. Alright, let's play that as kind of a closing to this part of the feature. Let's just see how it feels when you don't get the item at the very start. So you walk over here, you need to research this still. Coming up with a plan, sure. We'll have a little pop-up saying discovered, new recipe, and now we're collecting it. Okay. So I kind of liked it more when you got the item as a little reward, because it kind of feels just slower when you're not getting the item immediately, or it has like an immediate result. You do this thing and then you also have to wait for a progress bar. So we are going to go ahead and give them the item. Let's say give the player the item as a little bonus. Cool. So let's just make sure that that feels better. Come on, Unity, you can do it. So now we're back to, you go research this. When you're done researching, you get the item as a little bonus, and then you go into harvesting immediately. So we got 3 from harvesting. I think we should have 4 though. Yeah, we just don't show the UI pop up. So let's do that as well. And yeah, we probably should do the whole shebang. Cool. Once more into the world. Alright, researching. See, it might take a while, but you get that item originally and as like a reward for researching. So I think that's cool. We disco on these bushes real good. Go over to this overgrown bush. Cool. I think that's cool. So the 2 pieces that we talked about earlier that we want to still add in are, 1, this mouse tooltip. We're using our bare hands here, which results in assorted herbs. So if we are over here and we hover over that with our bare hands selected, it should give us a little preview of what item will be given for this tool. But if we were to bring in an axe and we don't know what item would be given, when we're hovering over it should give like axe equals question mark, question mark, question mark or something. So you can kind of cycle through. That is one thing that we want to add. We'll probably do that next. The other piece is the rhythm aspect of this harvesting. We want to highlight some sections and allow you to click during that section, and all it's really going to do is increase elapsed time by a set amount. So it's a super easy implementation, but we want to think through like the UI and the controls and stuff. So we could also do that next. Either one, really. We want to do them both. I'm a little intimidated by the math of just determining where on the bar to show and making sure we're clicking at the right point. But I guess let's think through, what button do we want to press when we're harvesting with something in order to progress it forward? Because we have, the buttons we have in the game already are left click to move and interact with stuff, which we don't want to use. We don't have right click yet, but we're going to have it. So I think I want right click to give like context menus, almost like it does in RuneScape actually. But if you right click on this bush, you might have an option for punch it with your bare hands. Maybe we do some other options for like your other tool belt things so you can choose that way instead of selecting the item. But we probably also want like inspect, generate some text like describing the bush, or like other ways to interact with the bush other than using your tools. We probably are going to put a lot of those in the right click menu. So we don't necessarily want to use right click to control this. We also have spacebar for jumping, which we could use since you're never going to be jumping while interacting, really. I mean, hopefully. It might be a little weird for it to have, or for the player to have both, like, interaction mini game on the same button as jumping. But, I mean, it's a big old button. It's probably nice to press for these kinds of things. I mean, if we disable the actual jumping, if I try and spacebar every time it touches Arboral, it's too fast for me. But you know, that could work. And we need some sort of state management anyway to be like, hey, you're in this interaction mode, so your controls are a little bit different. So let's do that. Let's use spacebar and let's build in that bit of interaction now. But let's go ahead and oh right, I have a lot of new stuff from generating everyone's avatars last night. But let's just say interaction progress bar. Interaction and research progress bars. We'll include everything. Who cares? Cool. So what we need now is a what do we want to call it? Critical harvest indicator. And that will need to render on top of the background. Let's put in some fill just so we can see this. Let's also go ahead and take our flat world, dead trees, first one, which should be our guy that we're testing. Let's increase that harvest time really a lot just so we can make sure this gets tested properly. It's not too fast. I'm pretty bad at those rhythm games. So now, this guy. So if we were to add an image for our kind of display, let's call it a background, I suppose. Maybe we do the like yellow or something. Maybe green is fine for now. Like that. That way. So if we put it here, it's really ugly. Alright, let's also give it a frame, maybe. It's fine. Okay, so if we do something like this, and we make it a little, right, a little wide, or less wide, we put it maybe here-ish. It's just a demonstration. Increase the height a little bit to line up with stuff, but we probably want it under this guy's frame. We'll play with the design a lot more, because obviously this is not it. But it shows you where you would want to interact with. We want to make sure, you know, what if we turn off the background? We just have a thicker frame. Something like that, because then we can have this fill come through and you can actually see it within that frame instead of having a background on it. So if you interact while it's within that frame, then you get the bonus that jumps maybe like up to here or something. If you interact outside of the frame, maybe it slows down a little bit, or maybe it just does nothing. Probably does nothing. Or have some sort of cooldown where you can't interact with it for a second, because otherwise you're just spamming the button. But we talked about how the item affixes on the weapon you're using or the tool you're using and the equipment you have might adjust, say like the width of this frame, like how much time you have, and also how much you jump. And there was another one, right? Oh, just how quickly the thing fills up on its own. So, what we need to do to get this working is, in our start interaction, we need to pick a random point between probably, I mean, we want to not have it in the first, maybe fifth, because we want to give the player the reaction time they need to be able to see it coming and press at the right time. And we probably also don't want it in the last, like, fifth, because it might jump, like, past the end. So somewhere in, like, the middle 3/5, we want to generate a random point and then place this guy. I guess this should be here, and we should resize this. We want to place this guy along the axis. So that's step one. Step two, we want to listen for the space bar during our interaction routine here. And if the space bar is pressed and we're within this window, so there's a lot of math coming up, but we place this window which lets us have a minimum and a maximum time fractions between 0 and 1. If we're within that window, when you press spacebar, we can just increase the elapsed time by a set amount, which is what determines this fill amount. And then it'll work. So let's go ahead and let's just ram our head at the wall until the math works. So we're going to say here random point you know, let's say starting dead zone is a fifth. Ending dead zone also a fifth. So we don't want to place it in that first. Let's look at exactly where it's at, because we might need a little more space. But if we have this fill set to 0.2, so this border will never appear before here or after about here-ish. We don't need to set it over there. Is that enough time? If this is the worst case for the player's reaction, I think that's fine, because they'll be able to see it wrapping over. They know that it might come pretty soon, so they're going to be looking in this area already. Really depends on how quickly the resource harvesting happens in general. Like at 8 seconds, it could probably be like over here-ish. But in 1 to 2 seconds, maybe here's too far over, but we can work with that. So that's a good start and end. So now we can say generate a random point between 0 and 1 outside of the dead zones at each end. So that is fine. So we're going to call this critical harvest point. So that is the point at which this border will be filled. So for example, if it gets generated to be 45, it'll be centered there. And we need to know the width of it. Because we want to generate like a minimum and maximum value. So inside the loop we can say if it's greater than the minimum and less than the maximum. But converting from the like pixel width to 0 to 1 scale is a little difficult, but I'm sure Andrew can come in and fix it later. Let's see here. So this guy's at 45. What happens if we say critical harvest point minimum? And yeah, I guess we should have a critical harvest point radius, or window radius. So we'll tweak that to be able to handle scaling between pixel values and 0 to 1 scales. But it should be the same on both sides because it's a constant scale. And so we want to position the critical harvest point, which let's make a reference for it, of public game object critical harvest point indicator. So position the critical harvest point indicator at the correct position. Hopefully it does it. Lerping. Oh, okay. Yeah, just lerp from -1 to 1. I don't think that's quite right. What's the min and max on fill? 0 to 1. Negative 50 to 50. What are you doing here? Critical harvest point indicator dot transform dot local position is equal to new vector 3. So x coordinate is what we are manipulating. Y and z are always 0. So mathf.lerp, what is our minimum? Gonna be about, well, it's not quite right because we have the dead zone, but like negative 520, maximum of about 500. And our T is our critical harvest point, which is 0 to 1, right? Is that reasonable? Okay, so that should position it somewhere random every time we harvest, but we're not going to be able to know if it's like correct in its positioning until we also get the spacebar interaction with it. So let's go ahead and let's head over to our player controller. Let's add a little flag for whether we're currently interacting with something. Is actively interacting is false. We will adjust that whenever we call interact. Start interaction with, we can go ahead and say equals true, and stop interaction is false. So now we know whether we're actively interacting, and we can go up to our jump and say, it's going to be spaghetti code real fast. If we're not jumping, that's how we adjust. Handle input should handle movement and jumping. Yes. So what we want to do here is say if is actively interacting, player uses spacebar to critically harvest, and if they're not actively interacting, then player uses spacebar to jump. And we don't need to do any logic here because we're going to be listening for the spacebar over here. We just want to make sure that we're not also jumping from this. Okay, so let's do that. Let's say listen for the spacebar to attempt a critical harvest if input.keydown keycode.space. If the fill amount is greater than the minimum and it's less than the maximum, that is correct logic, we'll hit a critical harvest. Either way, let's go ahead and say debug.log critical harvest attempted at t equals, okay. So I'm just now realizing time to fill is going to be greater than 1 in most cases. So we actually want time to fill minus ending dead zone here. So now if we go 8 seconds, for example, we start at t equals 0. We get a random point between 0 and 8, minus our dead zones at either side. So, for example, we get 5. Then our minimum will be 4.9, and our maximum is 5.1. That seems like a really small window. So I think we don't want a full second. Like, we wouldn't want 4 seconds to 6 seconds, but we could probably do a half second on either side. So if our critical window is at the 5-second point, then any spacebar between 4.5 seconds and 5.5 seconds, it's probably really easy to hit, but it's a good start. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll get 5 as our critical point. So 4.5 to 5.5 will be critical, valid. So if we were to press space when elapsed time, actually want elapsed time here, right? So if we press space when elapsed time is greater than 4.5, which is our minimum, and less than 5.5, then we have a critical harvest. We can jump our elapsed time up a bunch. Otherwise, it'll do nothing. Let's see how that looks. I don't think the indicator is going to be placed in the right spot, but we'll find out. Alrighty. So we're not going to get our indicator until we finish researching. And it is nowhere. Oh, and also we didn't set the reference. So harvest point indicator is this. We also, let's go ahead and set it to be active. So we can have it not shown by default, especially when we're researching. But let's just see like where it puts it. Does it even point it? Wow. Does it even put it on the bar at all? Does it put it like way over here? We'll find out. So we've got it set. Let's go ahead and disable it by default. Let's see here. Okay, so nothing. But then okay, it's as far to the right as we can. And spacebar does not jump. Interestingly, it doesn't seem to print out. Oh, okay, we got our critical harvest attempted. So we should print out where the harvest window is. But let's just, oh, I missed it. But it is placing it in random spots, so it could be working. I'll try and get it on the next one, which is at the very end. So it's probably wrong in some way. But let's see here. Almost in the window. I missed it. It's still too fast for me. Let's do this one. Okay, attempted. All right, so I think the placement is wrong. So let's go ahead and let's say critical harvest window is valid from there. Okay. And debug.log critical harvest point is there. And I feel like the local position is going to be, actually, we're probably, not using a local position here. So we can probably set it like, oh, this is local position. Alright, let's try with our debug, see where it's supposed to be spitting out. I see all those NPCs generating dialogue. We should turn them off again. But let's see what we got here. So valid from 5.8. I missed it. Oh, I got it. Yeah, so it's working, it's just not placing it correctly. So let's see what we get. Valid from 2.4 to 3.4. We got it that time. It's just not placing it correctly. So let's go look at our lerp function again. But let me go ahead and turn off all these NPCs real fast, just so they're not generating AI stuff in the background. Cool. So I think I'm just using lerp wrong, but local position. What we want is this guy. Maybe if we just set up some float critical harvest point x minimum is equal to negative 530, and I think that was 500, but let's double check it. Let's do 530. So we should probably just grab like the width of the parent object instead of hard coding in these pixel values, but I think it's fine for now. But we have those in the code, so hopefully it'll just lerp for me, please. So, critical harvest point divided by time to fill. What did we have? That would explain why it was so much larger, just a wrong scale. Alright, let's see if that gets it working. And I feel like we also need to adjust the width of it based on our window size, since it's static right now. And we increase the size, but let's just see. Alright, so 3.8 to 4.8 in the window, got it. Okay, it's at least on the scale each time. And that looks about right for 6 to 7. Got that one. So if I do it before the window, Yeah, we need to adjust the window size, but that seems fine. It's not too far off. But that's kind of cool. I mean, the UI is so bad, but you know, it does what I wanted it to do. We still need to add the jumping, but that should be not valid in that it's in a dead zone. So let's actually dead zone, let's say float interaction bar width is equal to 530. I don't think that's what we want. I think we want a fifth of time to fill. So we can exclude the fifth extreme values on either side. And now, let's say adjust the critical harvest point indicator's width to match the window. Size delta of radius times 2 times 1060. Interesting. Don't think that that is right. The width is not even displayed here because we have a rect transform. Size delta, is that just gonna scale it up, I guess? I mean, I guess we could do that. Let's see what it does, I guess. It's probably gonna be huge, I imagine. I mean, it's supposed to be hidden, but we left it on. Yeah, that's huge. You know what? We can just... Well, can we scale it manually? Because it's gonna... I guess it won't change based on the total time to fill, right? It's just the window size. So it's probably fine for now. Let's go ahead and just say float critical harvest jump amount is a sixth of, or like 0.15 times to fill. What is that? 1 divided by 15. It's about a 6 and a sixth. That should be fine. Let's see how that feels when we jump that amount. So really all we're gonna do here is just say elapsed time increases by that amount. So it'll jump the whole bar forward. See how that feels. And let's disable that just so we got the full vibe. All right, we're researching. Let's jump it forward. Pow! We'll want some like exploding particle effects or something there, but you know, jump forward. I think we could probably even jump forward a little more. Maybe not. Let's pause this. Let's take our dead trees. This guy, let's drop him down to a 4-second harvest time. Let's see how it feels with that. I think it's still too slow. Or maybe we just want to jump more. Honestly, like, so the two harvesting situations are, one, you're doing it AFK like this, and you just click on this tree, you're down to have it take as long as you want because you're off doing something else or like messing around in your inventory or whatever. I mean, maybe that should interrupt it as well. But if you are here to just get a bunch of resources real fast, maybe we do like half the bar. Because I think the jump just isn't enough. Our window is still way too small. Let's make it like, that might be more realistic. And actually that means we're now 465. Well, let's see if that maps correctly before we go update the dimensions. But that's what it feels more like. So I'm going to try and do it outside of that window. Okay, it didn't work. And I'll try and do it right inside the window. Okay, that did work. So I'll do the same on the other side, but it should be symmetric. So right inside the window, jumps, but right outside the window. Didn't jump. Alright, so that's cool. Let's drop this guy down to like maybe even 2 seconds. See how that feels when it's going a lot faster. I think most things will probably be like a second or less. So yeah, at this point, like the jump doesn't really mean anything at all. Maybe like a third of the bar is where we want to go. But that does make it a lot faster, which is kind of nice. Okay. So if the tree is 1 second harvest time, it's going to go a lot faster. Does the jump mean anything? You know, it's kind of nice. Jump is probably just fine where it's at there. The window is off for sure, because I can jump way back here and like after the fact. Basically any time, really. Alright, well, we'll fix that. But at least the little window of being able to harvest faster is working. Okay, so what we want to do, let's take out some of our debug now that we know it's working. Let's increase the jump amount to like a third of the whole bar. That might be a good baseline. We don't want it to feel grindy, but we do need it to feel a little punchy. And let's drop this guy down to like 4 seconds by default, maybe even 3 seconds. I guess we're gonna need to scale our window programmatically based on the harvest time. But that's a much nicer feeling jump, I think. Okay, I like that. So it's not so much that you feel like you have to do it, but it does help a lot and give you something to like focus on and do a little skillful thing as you're collecting. Okay, so last thing I think that we should do is figure out how to scale this window. So let's say scale window object based on harvest point radius divided by time to fill. Will you just do that? That does not seem correct at all. A half time or divided by time to fill. It's gonna be like twice the time to fill, right? So we want like 2 times window radius times some constant for the scale 2 pixels divided by time to fill, right? We'll just leave this in as a placeholder. If this does not work, I'll put in a to-do to sick Andrew on it. I am very much not our math guy, and he is very much our math guy. Alright, how are you going to reposition this? That looks incorrect, and it is, in fact, incorrect. So I should be able to scale that up. If the formula is right, we just need to know this constant. So let me just see if this gets us closer. But I think all the like particle effects and flashy stuff that you get when you do this successfully, we're gonna hold off for another day. This window is actually really large. It's like there's as early as you can jump, and then probably like here-ish. Maybe like, okay, getting closer. So it's about this far out. So it's slightly too big. So let's jump from 1 to 4. Let's go 4 to 6. And we're gonna need, okay, it does incorporate the window radius, cool. Okay, so that's still too small for our window radius, just barely, but I wanna get the scaling working, and then we can decrease the radius and make sure it looks good. So it's still just barely outside. So let's go up to like 8 even. I'm sure it's just going to be some magic number that I'm going to see and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense because, but it might not be. Okay. That's looking promising. Like right outside the window doesn't jump. And there's a little bit of wiggle room, I guess, but just barely. And right outside on the other side doesn't jump. I'm going to try and be right inside on the edges. Yeah, so it's just barely outside. I think that's fine. It's a little bit of convenience to the player, I guess, because we're going to decrease this window radius now. But it looks like it's scaling correctly. It's just a huge window. So let's go ahead and decrease that window. So we probably actually want the window to also be a function of time to fill, right? Because if it's 1 second to harvest a thing, do we want it to be like a half-second window, which would be the entire thing, or do we want it to be maybe a fourth of the total? An eighth of the total, maybe? That would mean on things that are really long to harvest, it's a pretty decently large window, but jumps a lot. And on things that are really fast to harvest, it's a really short window and probably fills it up the full amount. Because, well, it'll still fill up a third, because that's also a function of how much it is. So what we're going to do here is, let's take this guy. I'll put him 4 seconds. The branch behind him, or let's do this guy of 3 seconds, this guy 2 seconds, this guy's 1 second, and then let's do an 8-second guy back here. So we can kind of see what the window looks like at each duration, and just kind of how it feels. So this guy, 4 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Let's do the 1 second guy first. So we gotta research it first. It's a pretty big window, but you know, it's pretty fast paced, I guess. The dead zones probably need adjusted on this one because it can get so close to the beginning. And it doesn't feel good that, like, when you miss it, it's not based on skill. It's based on just, it shouldn't have been that early. How am I supposed to know? But it seems fine. We're getting a ton of items real fast. Like, that was fun for the most part, and I walk away and I have 49 berries. That's a ton of berries, actually. So this guy, which is 2 seconds, let's actually do an item just so we can kind of see a difference in the quantities we get. Okay, this feels a lot slower compared to the 1 second one. But it doesn't feel too slow. It's probably just barely slower than I would like. Like, it's probably, it feels fine to just let this go. Why are we not animating though? Huh. Oh, we might not have the animation. Oh, Axe doesn't have an animation, right. So if I just wanted to, like, collect some stuff while I'm at work, this is a fine speed. Let's use a hammer. Got 38 bundles of sticks from that. I want to use a hammer because the animation kind of plays into how fast it feels. So we're getting about 3 hits per harvest, which seems fine. But if we start critically harvesting, we're getting a lot more. I'll continue on with the other ones, but my inclination here is probably to decrease the window size and increase the amount it jumps. So it feels more like a reward and less like you have to do it every single time. It feels more skillful. But this was 2 seconds, so let's try 1 or 3 seconds. It's probably going to feel very similar. Let me in. Yeah, it feels fine. And then the really long one. I think this is when it'll feel most rewarding to do the critical harvest. Yeah, like it's also, if I left this AFKing, like I'm gonna get a lot of this item. It's gonna be fine. It doesn't feel super slow. Like it could be longer, but I don't want it to feel too slow. But I do want it to feel kind of punchy in the way that some, like the big old grand tree and some other big things, you should have to work more for the items that you get. There's a fine line between feeling grindy and feeling rewarding for putting in that work, though. So this is all fine. Let's increase the jump amount to twice as much, 2/3 of the bar. But let's make our radius way smaller, like almost 1/3 as small. Because it shouldn't be like super hard, but it should feel like a skill that you shouldn't be able to just like jump into and do every single time at the start, I think. So the really long one, it's a decent window size, I think. It's a pretty nice jump, I think. And we probably want to factor in the jump a little bit more into the dead zones just because it feels bad when you have to wait for the very end and then like anything past here-ish, you're jumping and missing out on some jump because it just instantly ends. But this seems fine. But if we start going to the smaller, or the faster ones, the window is probably going to get smaller, right? Yeah, it feels pretty bad when it's at the very end. Okay, so here. Window sure feels same size for everything. But I guess it is working because it's not jumping when I jump outside the window. So this feels too fast, actually. Like, this would probably be great for just AFKing, but it is too fast to hit that window every time. I think this might be the sweet spot. Or maybe just slightly faster than this. Oh, this guy was 4, not 8. Oh, okay. So I think this is what we wanted, and if we put it to 1.5, I want to see how that feels, and I want to decrease that jump amount to just half of the bar. I think that'll be easier to communicate too. And then maybe we also have a little on this guy. UI image indicator. We can put like a little arrow or something that just makes it a little more exciting. Maybe something like that. We can center that. Maybe move it up. It's not exactly the vibe, but I think it'll be fine. Might get a little bit weird when we scale it, but let's go see that 1.5 harvest time bush. That might be the sweet spot for like a baseline of some things are faster, some things are slower. I think it was this guy. Feels pretty good on AFK. I'm almost even, could be slower even. But if we start jumping, feels pretty good. It's 1.5. Let's do 1.8. Yeah, this feels better. And you can kind of see in the tooltips when you get sort of good at the jumps, they start stacking a lot better. And then when you miss it, they space out a little more, which is kind of cool. Just from a feedback perspective. Alright, so that seems fine. Let's take a quick look at our dead zones. I think they're fine. Like, when you have it further on in the bar, you get less reward when you use it, but it also makes it feel less required compared to just AFKing it. So I think that's fine. Alright, so this looks good, I'd say. We would definitely want to come clean all this up. We've got a bunch of variables just for Copilot's sake, but seems fine. We could actually, let's decrease the radius even more. Is that weird? Does that make it too hard? I'm sure we're gonna just keep playing with this forever, so I wanna maybe kind of wrap it up a little bit. There's a lot more I could do, but we've got the system kind of built in place, so I just want to play with it a little bit and see how things are feeling, really. Kind of get the vibe that I want. Let's make this guy back to 1.8, which I think was good. Maybe 1.75. It's a little bit better. Although I guess it will kind of feel out how the window looks. So it's real short, which is fine. So the smaller the window, the more it feels bad when it's further on, because it is more skill based and you're getting less reward, but seems fine. Does seem like, okay, it is pretty well lined up, I'd say, with where you can jump or not. And the jump feels pretty good when it's early on, which is nice. Cool. So is there a way we can not scale the indicator per chance? So it's getting, I mean, I guess we can just hack it. We know that it's getting squished. So let's do 2 seconds on that guy. I think that's going to be where we're at. Maybe we'll just play with it for a few more minutes. I think this is exciting though, because this was the last like big system that I wanted to build out on all the interactables before we start transitioning into level design. Obviously there's a few more systems we want to build in, like the image generation on items, the recipe viewer for all the items you've unlocked, and also all the recipes for like what tool on what object produces what. But all that is stuff that we can build as we progress through the level design as well. I just wanted to make sure that all the interactable stuff worked on every interactable, so we built this little scene to test it all out. So it'll be really exciting to switch over to level design, probably in a day or two, but we'll definitely be on it next week, which is cool. We're still shooting for a Steam demo for this at the end of the month, so I hope that that'll be ready. There's still a ton to do, but I mean the core systems and the core loop are in place. You can go talk to NPCs, which are disabled right now, but talk to NPCs, learn about their problems, go collect items in the world, craft the items you want, and go return those items to the NPC and solve their problems. There's a whole bunch of quest stuff that we built a couple weeks ago that like summarizes how your previous interaction with the NPC went and whether you solved their quest or not, and then it generates new quests, so they progressively get more and more high stakes, more intense. And yeah, I think that'll be a really fun core loop. That's kind of what we tested out in our systems test, which I'll link once more in the chat or in the stream. If you just hit !demo, you can play the systems test of this in your browser, which handles all the item crafting, the NPC generation, the quest generation, the quest resolutions. It's also got like traveling and foraging and a bunch of other stuff, which we're building into this as well. Obviously, this is a much bigger scale game, so I'm not sure that it'll be building correctly for a browser. It's already pretty darn large with all the assets we have, like multiple gigabytes. So loading in a browser is getting less and less palatable. So we're going to have a Steam demo soon. If you're interested in that, You should absolutely join our Discord, which I'll link in the chat as well. We've got the Chroma Golem Discord for game developers, gamers, and AI enthusiasts. We're really just a couple guys who love AI and love games, and we have pretty extensive backgrounds in AI, and we got the opportunity to start a game studio. And we're excited for what new mechanics we can unlock in games with that AI, like this infinite crafting system. And yeah, join the Discord. We'll definitely post when the demo's ready in there. We got a lot more stuff we're working on as well. We've got some cool NPC brain stuff coming in from Andrew soon. We're going to hook a lot of that up to our NPCs so they can talk to each other, they can move around town, interact with the world, stuff like that. Really, I've just been focused on this crafting system, which is, I think, really, really cool, and I can't wait to see it in a game. So, now that we've made a berry acorn meal with a handful of berries and an acorn, I am going to go ahead and say that's the end of the stream. Thanks for tuning in. I had a great time. Hope you had a great time. We're making good progress. Still a lot to do, but I'll be working off camera, and I will be here next Tuesday at the same time, 1 p.m. PST. And I would raid someone, but I see we are closing up shop. We're down to 1 viewer, so if you are the very special person still in the chat, thank you for sticking around, and I appreciate it. See you next week. Bye.